ladies, gents, and NBs. You've just entered the Last Save Lounge. Please pull up a chair. You are in good company. The Last Save Lounge is a weekly interview show where we dig into the stories, memories, and moments behind our favorite games. I'm your host, Aaron TurboHoodie Amendola, and hey, I'm happy you're here. This week, I am also happy to be joined by Jenna Stoeber, cultural critic and content creator. Jenna, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm apathetic that you're here, but, it's not my show, so, I'm not going to kick you out.
Yeah, I have a little bit more skin in the game. And hey, listeners, there are some days I'm more excited than others. But today, I'm definitely absolutely excited because we're going to talk about Jenna's favorite game of all time. As you know, Last Save Lounge is all about digging into those favorite games and those favorite moments. Jenna, I don't expect what you're playing now to be your favorite game of all time, but is there anything you're playing now that's really scratching that itch for you?
I've been playing an truly astounding amount of Hades 2. And you're going to say to yourself, well, of course you have. That's how you play Hades 2. You don't play a little, you play a lot. But I'm working on a video essay on it. And the thing about Hades 2, if you've played it, are you familiar with the Hades games?
Yeah, I have it on Switch and Steam Deck, which is just doubly awful for me because I don't get anything done.
Yeah. If you are trying to make video essays about the content of those games, it's extraordinarily hard because it's very hard to get certain interactions to happen. So it's really a dice roll every time you play a run if you're going to get the thing that you need. And that is sort of where I'm bogged down in now. But what I'll say is even grinding, it's a good game.
Yeah. What's your favorite weapon?
It really depends on the dataless power-ups I get. I do love the skulls. If you can get either of the power-ups that let you shotgun blast them or that makes them automatically come back to you so you can just endlessly cycle them, both very good.
100%. And last night I got that combo of the skulls where I didn't have to retrieve them. And I've beaten downstairs a handful of times, maybe half a dozen. Stairs I haven't been so successful at yet. I always get to Prometheus, and like after that, I'm done. Like, there's something with Hades 2 where, for the first time in a long time, maybe since Dragon Age Inquisition, I'm getting fed fan art and a lot of cosplay from the algorithm. And I'm showing my wife, like, look at this. This is Malinois, and this here is Icarus, and there's a love story. And she's like, oh no, I see what's happening here. This only ever happened during Dragon Age. So this is a bad thing for our household overall.
It's getting its hooks in you.
Yeah. And we're playing Absalom right now, which is basically our co-op version of Hades, but there's no good fan art yet. So here's hoping.
Not every great game gets fan art. Even games that sell really well, sometimes they don't just like hit in that way with fandoms, which I think is super fascinating.
Yeah, there's a certain je ne sais quoi that speaks to the people that play it, that like spurred people to do that cosplay. The first cosplay I ever did was Booker DeWitt from BioShock. And I look back and I'm like, why? Why did I do that?
It's an interesting choice for sure. Yeah, it was a different time. That game came out. Everyone was like, yeah, both sides are equally bad. So it's one I'm glad we've revised.
There's that one moment in that game, and I remember playing it thinking, no, I have the costume. I can't return this.
You committed to the costume before finishing it?
Well, remember that gameplay demo came out, and none of it was in the actual game. And I was just like, this looks cool. I love the first two.
You committed to the cosplay before the game came out?
Okay, there's a lot of people that commit to the cosplays before the game comes out. I just made a really ill-informed decision about it.
That is buck wild to me.
That was the one and only Comic-Con I went to in cosplay, and I might have even been like right before the game came out. I can't remember when C2E2 was. But yeah, never again. I still have the Skyhook. So that's neat.
That's cool. That's pretty cool.
Before we get into your favorite game of all time, Jenna, I wanted to ask some questions because I've been watching your content for quite a bit. Last year, I remember seeing a video that you made about Steam Next Fest demos, and you were the one that turned me on to mouthwashing. And then, which I know, and you just released a video all about mouthwashing, and I watched it earlier this week, and all these details came flooding back to me. You were pointing things out about the UI that I'm probably didn't notice when I was playing, but it was just such a fun video. I had to ask, as a University of Wisconsin-Madison student, does Bucky Badger inspire just as much terror as the moose from mouthwashing?
No. No, are you kidding? Badger. A real-life badger might. Bucky the Badger, no.
As somebody that didn't have college sports in their college experience.
Really?
Yeah, I went to a theater school. They didn't let us play sports. They were like, please, no, you must sing, dance, and tap your way to a degree and then not be left with a job afterwards. But I hear like Bucky Badger and I think of Bucky's the gas station, and like just to have any mascot feels like something I missed out on. But I really, really enjoyed that video. And it's the sort of game where now I want to go back through it because it's been some time and be able to look at some of those things that I may have missed the first time around. I know you're also very big into the horror genre, horror culture in games, movies, things like that. And I had to ask because it's one of my favorite questions. But if you were asked to hire a musician for a new folk horror game, who might you pick?
That's a good question. My instinct was to go to a lot of composers that have already done similar things. I was just thinking, I just recently taught a class on folk horror, and one of the movies that we covered was Candyman. And Philip Glass does the soundtrack for Candyman, which is a pretty wild composer choice, but really does some interesting stuff with it. But that's almost too obvious because he has already done the thing. What, like modern musicians? Does it have to be somebody still alive?
Oh, no. I mean, sometimes there's just a good fit. Like that Tron movie had 9 Inch Nails, and like, hey, it's one long 9 Inch Nails music video now. But yeah, alive or dead, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see David Bowie take a hack at anything, because that would mean we got new David Bowie audio to groove out to. And I actually do feel like Black Star, to a certain extent, at least the music videos for Black Star, but also the vibe of the album was very much a kind of a folk horror vibe. If anything, you could just take that and apply it to a movie, probably like Pink Floyd's The Wall style.
My first experience with Pink Floyd, if I recall correctly, was the trailer for The Faculty. Because I think Another Brick in the Wall was like the theme of that.
So it was a go-to for a long time, yeah?
Yeah, and I mean, you can still go back and watch it, but those kids don't age, and then you just feel really, really old. Okay, before we get into our favorite game of all time, I wanted to ask, because last year you made a video on Vampire Survivors and those auto shooter games where you essentially told the audience, give permission to turn your brain off, give permission to zone out. There's so many of these games out now. My wife and I were playing through Clover Pit. I've lost a few hours to Mega Bonk recently. Has anything come for the crown of Vampire Survivors, or is that still the top for you?
Yeah, I mean, Hades 2 for a while was very much that, where it was like, it's a game that you can turn off some parts of your brain for. And it was very much like in the evening after I'd done all of my work video game playing, and I would
You deserve more games as a treat.
Yeah. Hades 2 was very much that, because it is like, it operates on such an instinctive basis where it's stimulating parts of my brain that are different from that which I stimulate during my work. And so even though I don't think it would be traditionally called a podcast game, that is sort of how I treated it. So
that's what I did last night. I listened to the Besties and did that skull run in Hades too. Because after a while, you're like, Odysseus, I know what you need. Like, I don't really need to talk to you. I need to go talk to my girlfriend.
Nemesis.
Oh, what's her? Yes. Yeah. What a hell of a game. But instead of this being a Hades 2 podcast, we could, honestly, I just need to get my wife to play it and then we can fanboy out over it. But we're going to have a brief message from me. And then when we come back, we will talk about your favorite game of all time. The Last Save Lounge is supported by Patreon at patreon.com/hoodieweather. By supporting Hoodie Weather, patrons get a bonus segment each week, a bundle of Hoodie Weather games, and ad-free episodes in your feeds. If times are tough, we think you are too. You can still support The Last Save Lounge by rating and reviewing us on your podcast app of choice, so please tell your friends or your rivals. We are not picky. Okay, and we're back with Jenna Stoeber. And here comes the big question, Jenna. What is your favorite game of all time?
Portal!
Yeah, that's a killer pick. I love that. Why Portal?
It's simply the best game of all time. And my opinion is not subjective, it's objective. It's just the best. It's firing on all cylinders. It's got excellent gameplay, excellent writing, excellent design, a very iconic imagery. It gets in, it gets out. It's a perfect little bundle of the game.
You know, that hidden ingredient of gets in, gets out. I think I could
Mm.
finish that game in under 2 hours. And something I love is just knowing when they're done. First time you played it, do you remember where you were?
I was playing it on at the person that I was dating at the time. They were like, "Oh, you've got to play this game." I forgot. This was like, I had to have been in college. I played games growing up, but then sort of stopped playing games in high school and college because I think partially of where games were at the time. It was all like, "Oh, Halo, oh yeah."
Yep.
It was a dark time in gaming. And so there just weren't a lot of games that I was aware of coming out. There were games coming out at that time that I would have enjoyed, but I wasn't aware of them. I was disconnected with it. But I started dating somebody who was very much into games, and he sat me down and was like, "You gotta play this game." And that game was Portal. And that was a miserable experience because he was just the most insufferable nerd. And I mean that in the worst ways possible. He was also just a terrible human being, but he was crouched on my shoulder the whole playthrough, and he would be like, huh, "The cake's alive," and just like
No.
anytime I took more than anytime I didn't immediately solve a puzzle, he'd be like, "Oh, are you struggling?" Like just like all of the worst kind of nerd characteristics that you don't know that you don't have to put up with when you're dating in college. So that was a very bad experience, but the game was so good. It really got me like back into playing video games.
Is there a reason you stopped? Was it just that Halo was kind of dominating the industry and it didn't feel like there was anything that appealed to you?
No, what happened was, so growing up we had one video game system and it was a Game Boy, and it was my sister's Game Boy. And whenever she got bored with it, I would kind of pick up the crumbs
Mhm.
of Link's Awakening and Final Fantasy and Mario and that sort of thing. But it got to a certain point, probably, if I had to guess, probably the Game Boy died. Like probably the batteries ran out. And then that was sort of it. Like we had a few PC games. We had one called Outlaw that made me extraordinarily motion sick. But I still played it because I was like I loved games. But there were times there and there. I remember having an emulator in high school and playing a lot of like old SNES games. But like I wasn't playing modern games because the modern video game community was so hostile, and people who played games specifically were so hostile to my
Mhm.
presence. So I played games, but they were older games. It was the Chrono Trigger era. It was my Maple Story era.
Oh my God. Just hearing Chrono Trigger era awakens some nostalgia in me that, like, I'm back on my front porch. I'm hearing the sound come in from the pause menu. Like, I absolutely love that. For what it's worth, you telling that story reminds me so much of my wife because she grew up with a Game Gear. She loved the Sonic Game Gear games. And she always tells me that the Xbox 360 era was the era that games lost her because it was all Halo. It didn't feel like there was room for her. And what's funny now is they announced that Halo campaign evolved, and I'm like, I don't think I have room for you anymore. So there's a lot of X's going on right now. So I got to ask because Portal, killer pick, perfect game, and a game that really seized control of the industry for some time, made me fall in love with Jonathan Colton, made me really discover Half-Life 2. Like that was my
Yeah.
entry point. I remember sitting my friends down watching the end of Half-Life 2 episode 2 and they were like, "We don't get it." And I was like, "You of course you don't." Was Portal 2 impactful at all? Do you have any love in your heart for that one?
Yeah, Portal 2 is great. Yeah, I love Portal 2, but it's hard to recapture that moment. I'll say I probably should go back and replay Portal 2 because I did enjoy it. I played it. It survived. It lived up to all of the hype. It was a good expansion of the universe and all the lore. I don't dislike it. It's just not Portal. You know, it's just not Portal is the thing.
Yeah, it's so hard to do a 10 out of 10 again.
Yeah.
And It was like 3 or 4 times as long as Portal 1, I remember, and as much as I love Cave Johnson, I was like, you always feel yourself getting to the edge of that precipice, but Portal knew when to quit.
Yeah.
What was it about Portal that did it for you? Was it the puzzle gameplay? Was it the humor? Was there anything that really grabbed you?
It is the women, Aaron. It was the women.
Hell yeah.
It was the women of it all. I mean, because again, I cannot emphasize at what a grim time video games were at this time. And it's not just it is the community, but it was also like advertisers were very much like, this isn't a game for girls. Like that was literal advertisement money was going to like making sure women were actively excluded from playing video games. And it worked on me. But it was sort of a revelation to come because even the older games I was playing, like the SNES games, it's like there weren't a lot of women around. I simply, especially at that time in my life, I simply was not interested in playing as a male character or seeing a story about men. It simply did not appeal. It still, in many ways, does not. And so playing Portal was incredible because you're playing a female character. It was clear to me immediately that the relationship being written between Shell and GLaDOS was very much like a mother-daughter relationship, this kind of controlling, sweet, but manipulative, and using the sweetness as manipulation. All of that I thought was such an interesting and so well written and so well acted on Ellen McLean's part from GLaDOS about this relationship. It was just such a female-centric experience. Plus you have it in many ways was like subverting the idea of the shooter genre because you're not shooting bullets, you are shooting vulvas, and those vulvas appear on walls and then you move through them, and there's something like extraordinarily Freudian about the whole experience where it's like, here's a non-violent shooter, here's a core concept, and we're going to iterate on that core concept. There's going to be an anti-capitalist theme. It's just firing on all cylinders.
You are making me want to replay this now because now that I'm reimagining the portals, how can I see them as literally anything else?
No
and
need.
As far as games, emulating Portal's success, there's definitely games that make me reminiscent of Portal, but I don't think there's any as woman-led as that game. Reframing in my mind GLaDOS as that mother too. Yeah. That's really, really great point. And the fact that we know that Shell is doomed to kind of repeat that relationship to some extent almost makes it more tragic. As far as that game coming out at that specific time in your life, does it remind you of any one location? Is there any sort of transition that happened in your life that you equate with that game?
I mean, do you mean like in a physical sense?
I think physical. For me, Portal reminds me of my freshman year at college, and I feel like I can remember walking dorm to dorm. I was actually hosting Halo Blood Gulch deathmatch parties because I was a commuter. I wasn't on the campus, but I remember those Halo parties turning into Portal parties. And I was sort of showing people this game around different dorms on Penn State. So yeah, I think I made a lot of friends showing them that game.
That's very sweet. I mean, yeah, it definitely reminds me of like college. And just everything. I mean, because we also did like LAN parties because this is still the era when you did LAN parties and like bundling up your computer to play Left 4 Dead in somebody's apartment and doing stuff like that was so core. So in a way, it does remind me of all of that. And it also reminds me a lot of grad school because when I started to apply for grad school, I was very much like, should I study video games or should I study horror media? And it came down to whether when I was writing my essay to get access to get admitted into a grad school, it was very much like, okay, either I'm going to talk about Portal and the things that are happening in this game, or I'm going to talk about horror media and try to get in on that. And I went with Portal and I wrote an essay about it and the sort of design concepts and everything that is happening in the game because I think it's incredible. And I got in, so that must have been the right choice. I did end up obviously studying horror media because you can't just study video games. You have to study something really, really specific. So horror video games. But
yeah, as somebody that went to school for musical theater and philosophy, I get it. I struck out with both. I feel like if I could go back, I love horror media. My wife and I celebrate what we call Long Halloween, September 1st. To November 15th because we don't want Thanksgiving to encroach on our trick-or-treating time. Specifically in the last few years, horror media has seen such an explosion. You know, just this year, I feel like Sinners is really rewriting a lot of the rules for what people view as a horror movie and what they can do with a horror movie. But I look back at something like a Silent Hill 2, and I'm like, games have been doing it for so long. I know we've already talked about mouthwashing, and of course, we're talking about Portal, but are there any horror games or movies right now, or just media in general, that you would recommend to people?
I mean, it has to be mouthwashing. It came out last year, and it is such an incredible game, an incredible experience. It has a really fascinating and very robust fandom as well. So if you're interested in that sort of participation, that is a great angle. I mean, yeah, it's funny you mentioned Silent Hill because Silent Hill F just came out.
Mhm.
A very divisive game is what I'll say. Then there was also the Silent Hill remaster that came out last year. Similarly, I think very divisive. But I mean, there's so many. There's a genre on the rise right now called anomaly hunters. Have you heard of Exit 8?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
realize that was the name of the genre for that game.
Yeah, well, that's how much it is on the rise. Like, it doesn't have a much clout yet, but it is like the main movement, I think, in indie horror games at the moment. That and like pixel, low poly kind of mystery point and click games are the other like really popular indie horror games happening right now. But Exit 8 got made into a movie in Japan and is going to get a release by, I think Neon is distributing it in America.
Sounds like
So
Neon. Yeah.
that's gonna happen sometimes next year. And I haven't seen it yet. I look forward to seeing it, but the game itself is just a really satisfying, again, like little nugget of a game where you get in, you hunt for anomalies, you get scared a bunch, and then you leave.
I love that games are allowing people to have that feeling of dread and that feeling of horror in a very safe space. At least for me growing up, I grew up in suburban Pennsylvania, and that whole place is cornfields, forests. So Resident Evil really allowed me to kind of interact with those environments without actually going to them. And I just love, especially this time of year, being able to play something like that and not like put myself in a terrible situation, but it's just such a great gateway.
Were you a big Portal 2 fan? Were you
You
more of
know,
a Portal 2 fan than a Portal 1?
no, I wasn't more of a Portal 2 fan. It was more just that was the game that I could play on PlayStation because I was a PlayStation person. Jenna, have any games released recently kind of echoed Portal for you? Have there been any that have reminded you of that gameplay experience in any way?
I mean, I think all indie games that come out today
Are miracles.
that true. That too. No, they owe something to Portal because Portal kind of established the template that modern indie games do, which is like Portal kind of made it okay for a shorter game to be the full game. And that's at least partially because it wasn't like a standalone game, right? It's
Hmm.
part of the orange box. It was sort of a demo. But it proved that people could love and latch onto a game that is, 4 hours long. And that is the indie blueprint. The other indie blueprint that I think Portal really established is like, we're going to have one mechanic and we're just going to iterate on that mechanic in lots of different ways. We're just going to explore everything you can do with that in a sort of puzzle format. And that is the strategy that a lot of modern indie games take. It's so representative of what indie games sort of ended up being. And so like to answer that, yeah, almost every indie game I play in some way I can see how it leads back to Portal and the things that Portal kind of established in the gaming industry. But I will say specifically, I just played a game called Motion Wreck, where you play as a little robot and you have a cassette tape and you can record your motion as you're platforming and then play that motion back. So it is a sort of puzzle situation where you have to find the area you need to navigate. You need to record the pathway to get to that, and then you need to play it in such a way that you are able to overcome puzzles and difficulties and barriers and such.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and it very much has that moment in Portal where you go from being in one section and then suddenly things turn dire and like you're under attack and you have to kind of escape, which I think is another thing that you see in a lot of indie games, that kind of emotional moment of in Portal when you're descending into the fire and you are suddenly having to put to the test this very calm, otherwise mild kind of puzzle game strategy.
Yeah, you're about to be thrown into that fire, and you have the idea, that eureka moment of, wait, I can just portal my way out of here.
Yeah.
And at that moment, you're like, oh, this is the game.
This is the game. Yeah. That kind of pivot.
That. You know, when you said that every indie game owes something to Portal, it reminded me of RIP, the Xbox Summer of Arcade. If I recall, games like Braid, Geometry Wars, I think Portal was somewhere in the release of that. Xbox really did make their name on indies, especially when the Xbox 360 came out, and who knows what Xbox is doing. But I think you're right. There is a lot of that mentality, especially making like one complete package into one solid idiot into a game. And it's wild now that we're seeing some of that repackaged. You know, Braid 15th, 20th anniversary just came out, and I'm like, you're still around? Jonathan Blow, what are you doing?
Another incredibly impactful. I mean, it's like Portal, Braid. God, what was that one that Fish made?
Well, Fez.
Yeah, Fez, another Super Meat Boy. Like, these are the iconic sort of establishing saints of indie games.
I would love to walk into a basilica and see the main character from Fez, like, just standing like this at the very front. And on the way there, like, we'll even make like a spot for all the other XBLA people, even the Geometry Wars Pixel. Wow. I spent a lot of money on Xbox Live Arcade games way back in the day, and all of those were on my hard drive. Jenna, I think we are going to wrap up this episode, but I wanted to give you an opportunity. It's your favorite game of all time. It's Portal. It's Valve. If you could, if you had to tell somebody who hasn't played it your pitch, what would you tell them?
That's so hard. Hello, listener. Welcome to Last Save Lounge. Hello, listener. You never played Portal, huh? You must be young. You must be young. This game was everywhere. This game was like the biggest game when it came out. You're gonna think, what could this game that's probably 80 years old by now? Wait, when did this game come out?
No, it's 90.
7.
That's like 90.
How can this almost 20-year-old game stack up to modern games? And you're gonna look at it and say, you know, the graphics are a little bit old. That's fine. Came out in 2007. You have to understand that the strengths of this game are in the incredible jokes, the incredible vocal performance from GLaDOS, the shockingly good level construction, the variety of ways you need to implement puzzles. You're gonna learn about something called the companion cube, and it is gonna change your life. And it's a thing that is playable probably sub 6 hours. It's absolutely worth it if you can get your hands on it. It's probably still on Steam, right? Does it still run on Steam?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's on my Steam Deck right now. And I think they've released enough mods and upscalers where it probably looks pretty good. It'll never look the way I remember it looking on Xbox 360, but it probably looks better, like to the point where I'm like, no, give me the crappy version of how this looked. I don't want it to have 4K God rays or anything like that. Absolutely love that, Jenna. Thank you so much for joining us. If folks want to know more about your work and watch some of your awesome videos on YouTube, where would we send them?
You would go to youtube.com/@the_Jenna, I think. Let me double check that. I can never remember what has underscores. Yeah, that one does. You'll find all my video essays there. Video essays on mouth washing, Indica, on Nintendo. There a huge variety of video essays there. When you hear this episode, I'll have released November's video, which is on Hades 2. And that is going to be an excellent video. So check that out. youtube.com/@the_Jenna.
Well, you know, I am definitely in for that Hades 2 video. And that sounds like a nice way for me to break up my day when we're done. Maybe I'll go upstairs, try to defeat God. We'll see how it goes. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us for The Last Save Lounge. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Remember, The Last Save Lounge is produced by Hoodie Weather, creating comfy games and podcasts broken in like your favorite hoodie. You can support Hoodie Weather by heading to patreon.com/hoodieweather and becoming a patron for just $1. Jenna Stoeber, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we'll see you later, listeners.